Does Halo kill the Flood? This is a question that fans have been asking since the earliest days of the franchise, and one that can be understandably confusing, especially given how Halo CE originally described how Halo worked.
Halo doesn't kill Flood, it kills their food. Humans, Covenant, whatever. We're all equally edible. The only way to stop the Flood is to starve them to death. And that's exactly what Halo is designed to do. Wipe the galaxy clean of all sentient life.
And how later depictions of Halo's operations were depicted. Naturally, I could give a straightforward answer and basically end the video in a couple minutes. But that's no fun, right? Let's talk about how the explanation of the Halo effect has changed and evolved along with the franchise. Naturally, we'll start by circling back to that quote from Halo CE. After meeting with Guilty Spark, the player and Master Chief are told that the only way to stop the Flood outbreak that we've been experiencing is to activate the Halo weapon. Then, after retrieving the activation index and returning to the control room, Cortana suddenly shocks us with the truth. Halo doesn't kill the Flood, it kills their food, sentient life. It's not only a great twist, but one with a rather terrifying implication. The Flood is such a virulent organism, it cannot be killed at a large enough scale with conventional weaponry. The only way to defeat the Flood for good is to starve them of any food source, meaning to wipe the entire galaxy clean of sentient life. And that's it, right? That's the answer. All life is killed and the Flood starve over, a few centuries? Seems rather simple. Even when Halo 2 came along, it basically reiterated the same point.
Weapons of last resort, built by the Forerunners to eliminate potential Flood hosts, thereby rendering the parasite harmless.
But then we get to Halo 3. At the end of the game, when the Chief and Arbiter find Installation 08, the replacement ring for Installation 04, Chief decides to light it. Overjoyed, Spark exclaims,
"A tactical pulse will completely eradicate the local infestation."
And suddenly Halos can kill the Flood? Eradicate, as Spark puts it. Granted, he is talking about a tactical pulse, which is technically different from how the rings normally operate, but the only difference is that a tactical pulse is a single ring firing as opposed to the entire array. So it's functionally the same as what Spark wanted in CE, and what almost happened in Halo 2, just on a, relatively speaking, smaller scale. 50,000 light years as opposed to 3 radii from galactic center. Adding to the confusion though, later depictions of the Halo effect would show the Flood actually being killed by it, even wiped away. So what gives? Was Cortana simply mistaken in CE? Was something retconned? Let's dive in. The Halo array works by sending out a harmonic pulse that will destroy the nervous system of any sentient life, from sapient forms like human and Sangheili, down to less intelligent life, i.e. animals. This includes Flood forms, even pure forms. Pure forms may have been crafted from raw biomass rather than infected existing bodies, but they still use a nervous system. Thus, the Flood are affected and killed by the Halo effect. What the rings don't kill, however, are the more rudimentary Flood forms, such as Flood spores and, more notably, the Flood supercell. When an organism is infected by the Flood, Flood supercells will rapidly capture and interface with host cells, metabolizing them, breaking them down, and reassembling them into more Flood cells. And that process repeats until the body is completely infected. These Flood cells, closely resembling neurons and glial cells, are described as thinking muscle and can mimic any organ needed for an infected host to operate. These, and again the other simple Flood forms, are what need to starve, so to speak, after the array is fired. So even if a Flood form has been killed, the Flood supercells that make up its body are still active and virulent, and any Flood environments, similar to what we see in Halo 3, would still be a threat. Granted, it's much more difficult for the Flood to infect something with these more rudimentary forms, but they're still viable infectors. So, does Halo kill the Flood? Yes, but it leaves behind plenty of raw Flood biomass that can represent a threat to any life being reseeded after an array firing. Biomass that must be allowed to, quote, starve to death. This is what Cortana meant back in CE, or at least, this is what it has come to mean. However, there's one last part of this story to tell. While the rings do kill Flood and any life with a nervous system, they still leave their remaining bodies intact despite what common depictions may show. To avoid having to wait for years for the biomass, flood or otherwise, to decompose, and to avoid any ecological disaster in the wake of so much rotting flesh, planets that were due to be reseeded were sprayed with a solute. The solution would cause the recently dead to instantly decay into their component molecules, something that we actually saw visualized in the Halo CEA terminals before it was even mentioned in the books. But there you go, the function of Halo explained, from where it started to where it is now. Hopefully this clears up any confusion or questions that anyone had, but let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Thank you for watching as always, and until next time, this has been Halo Canon. First, I'd like to give a big thank you to our Haruspice patron, Hope. Hope is the very first Haruspice, so an extra special thank you on top of that. Next, I'd like to thank our theoretical patrons. If you'd like to see your name here or get a direct shout out, check out patreon.com/halocanon. You can simply support the channel or get additional benefits, such as behind the scenes material and shoutouts like this. However, your continued viewership is more than enough for me. If you enjoyed this video, please consider giving it a thumbs up and maybe even subscribing to the channel if you haven't already. If you really enjoy this, turn on that notification bell so you can be among the first to see new videos when they release. But for all my fellow Canonites, keep on being awesome.